From the grind to the glory, one man's journey proves that heart, hustle, and determination change the game. This is Catch as Catch Can with George Tinsley Sr., where adversity is met head-on and champions are made. Here's George.
Welcome to Catch as Catch Can. I'm George Tinsley Sr., former professional athlete, entrepreneur, author, and your host. This is a space where we sit down with leaders who face real challenges, learned real lessons, and kept moving forward.
Turning obstacles into opportunity.
Hello. Guy Coffey is a franchising veteran with over 19 years of experience, including co-founding the franchise system and helping scale fitness franchises. Passionate about entrepreneurship, Guy is dedicated to helping others build successful businesses while creating a life centered around family, fitness, and personal growth. Welcome to the podcast today, Guy.
I am super happy to be here. Thank you, George.
Well, we're happy to have you and to get to know a little bit about you and about your system and how our folks, our audience can find you. So let me just start off by asking the question of what drew you to franchising nearly 2 decades ago?
I have this conversation a lot with people in franchising, and it always starts out with, I kind of fell into franchising, except for a handful of people that we know who grew up in franchise families. And so I was looking for an opportunity to go into business with my wife and my sister-in-law and brother-in-law, and I was in the fitness industry, and I read a blurb about a small little concept that seemed to be growing fast in Minnesota, and I went down that path with it. And that was my introduction to franchising. And it's turned out very well. That brand was Anytime Fitness when it had like less than 100 units. And now it's global in 37 countries, 5,000 plus clubs. And we've owned a handful of them in Colorado for a long time.
So, Guy, when you first got in to franchising and working with a franchisor and developing a territory, tell us about that, how that all unfolded, new guy getting into the business.
Yeah.
Franchise.
Yeah. It was back in those days for Anytime Fitness. It was 2006. It was the Wild West. Chuck and Dave, who I consider friends and mentors of mine, had this idea. They never even owned a franchise. They had gyms. They had a gym membership sales company that would go around and help gyms boost their membership. So they're very good at sales. And one day they were like, hey, we noticed that most of the people coming into our gyms aren't using the pools, the saunas, things like that. They're using cardio and weights. Why don't we have a concept where it's way smaller, but way more convenient? People come in, they get their workout done whenever they want, 24/7, which was brand new at the time, and see how that works. And they literally said, hey, Eric, you want to be our first franchisee? Eric was a guy that was actually buffing the marble floors in one of their gyms, who is now the head of their international division, Eric Keller, also someone that I consider a friend. So my introduction to franchising was, man, it's growing, it's fast, they're trying new things out. We get good deals on equipment. They give us some direction on how to sell, how to hire, how to retain, all these kind of things. And that's what I needed as a business person, because I can execute, I understand processes, I can build them now, but back then I couldn't. But I don't have this creative, like, hey, I'm this and this, I'm going to put them together and do this. That's not me. So I really liked the structure. As loose as it was in the beginning with Anytime Fitness, there was some structure and some direction from someone that I know, liked, and trusted.
Mm-hmm. So a lot of people that are listening today look at franchising as McDonald's, as Burger King, as Five Guys. But in your business, tell us a little bit about how the franchisor franchisee relationship works and some of the guidelines that resources that that the group is in place. Sounds like you got started back when they were actually getting started. So how is that today for a person that's looking to get in?
Yeah. It's a question of if you're working with an emerging franchise brand or a very established franchise brand. So very established are the brands that you've already mentioned, McDonald's, Burger King, now even Anytime Fitness with their growth and everything like that. That's opposed to an emerging brand, which could be someone that had a great idea, built a great business, did some kind of proof of concept that it's not just that person's ability, affecting the unit economics at that location or the couple around their house or something like that. They've gone outside of their market. They've gone outside of their own expertise and had someone else run their model to prove it. That's called proof of concept. And those brands, they can have 3 units. They could have pretty much, I would say, up to 50, depends, could be even more. And that is a different type of franchise system that you're joining. And people would say like, well, the idea of franchising is that you're in business for yourself, but you're not in business by yourself. Going back to that structure that I mentioned earlier and all the direction and the benchmark you can do with other people running the same model. So as that's growing and there's more data to show like, yes, you do this, this, and this, you do our recipe, you will be successful. That's still getting formulated in an emerging franchise brand. And so people would say like, well, if you're going to be paying royalties and paying all these things to be in a franchise system, why wouldn't you go with the one that's already established? And the reason is, number one is sometimes it's way too expensive for someone to get in. And secondly, there is an excitement around being part of something that's being built that you can't monetize. Later on, you kind of can monetize it, but in the beginning, it's just like, I like this concept. I like the people who are involved, or whether it's the founders or the support team around the founders. And this will go really well in my community or in my state or however big you want to go. So there's this established brands versus emerging brands. And sometimes it's like 2 separate buyers. There's people that want to be at the beginning of things, early adopters. And then the other part of that is if it's a great franchise system with solid founders and support team that are open to ideas, you can actually help mold what that system's going to turn into. So it's not 2 totally separate buyers. I know plenty of people that have a lot of QSR restaurant, quick service restaurants, your world, that are also in other brands that are unrelated to QSR and fitness and beauty and things like that. But it's a question of how established that brand is versus is it still growing really fast? And is it still getting shaped by not just the market, but the people involved in the system?
In your experiences in some of the early days as you built your business, your group as you built your business, what were some of the obstacles that you faced that helped you? That helped you and, of course, motivated you to continue on and grow to bigger and better things.
Yeah. Well, with Frenchies Modern Nail Care, that was our beauty brand, our nail care brand that my wife Stephanie and I co-founded and built. And we started a nail salon back in 2014 as proof of concept. Being on both sides of the franchisor and the franchisee relationship, I see the challenges, I live the challenges, and they're definitely real. And for lack of a better term, the franchisor-franchisee relationship is kind of like a parent-child relationship. I'm a franchisee, so I don't consider myself a child. But in terms of the structure there is structure from the parent that the child either like stays within or goes off in a totally different direction than the parent wants, or they kind of do what the franchisor recommends. And I can tell you, with growing Frenchies Modern Nail Care, we still had Anytime Fitness clubs running. There was times when I wasn't the ideal franchisee. I wasn't people would be like, oh yeah, well, that notice came out 2 weeks ago. Didn't you know about it? I was like, I'm a bad franchisee right now. No, I don't know about it. Not checking in, not engaging with the system, just running the businesses. And so there's the obstacles are from the franchisor side. Of course, there's capital. It takes a lot of money to get going, to have the right structures and tools, and most importantly, the right people who are experienced in franchising. They're not cheap, and they shouldn't be cheap. And so you have the capital constraint, and then it's building the proper technology stack so that you can actually operate this business. Your team has the tools and the processes. They're not cheap. It's point of sale systems are expensive. Marketing is expensive, and having everything talk to each other sometimes requires a technology strategist to make sure that everything's going to go. So there's the money constraint. And then there is the, just the franchise development, which is the term in franchising. It's basically franchise sales, selling territories. And it's a big purchase, a lot of dollars involved, and it's life-changing usually, as you know, because you've lived this for many years. It's a life-changing thing in terms of financial risk, in terms of this is where all your energy and time and focus are going to go for a while. Hopefully it's not to the detriment of your family. And that's one of the things that I'm always trying to get across to people is I believe entrepreneurship is really good for families, communities, states, nations, the world. I 100% believe that. I think franchising provides a really good path for that. And I also think it's really good for families. And so because the children can grow up seeing like, wow, someone does something wrong or something, it really affects this family. Someone does something right, it really affects this family, which affects everybody around them. And so the obstacles on the franchisor side is the other thing is picking the right franchisees, being choosy about who's going to be joining your group, especially in the pioneering days. And then on the franchisee side, you got to be just like franchisors, you got to be solving problems virtually every day. Like 19 problems a day, and hopefully you get over 50% of them right. And that is small business. That is not, particular or unique to franchising. And so as a franchisee, you do have these systems, these tools, these recommendations. You can ask other people in your system like, hey, my conversion rate is half of what yours is. What are you doing? And so the challenge with franchisees is staying engaged, keeping your ego out of things. You're going to be so good at some things, and some things are just not in your wheelhouse, or maybe it's not in the wheelhouse of anybody on your team right now. And it's sometimes the reaction is to disengage and be like, oh, this doesn't work. Like the model doesn't work. But I'm here to tell you, I've sold a lot of Anytime Fitness clubs that weren't my own, because that's another business that we were in. And I've sold them for a lot of money, and I've sold them for a little money in very similar markets. And almost all the times with the people with the low performing units, it was looking at the model, pointing the finger at the model, or their market is so completely different than anybody else's that the model doesn't work here. I would say 95% of the time, that's not the truth, unfortunately. So sometimes I've run, multiple Anytime Fitness clubs, same size, same equipment, same employment model, everything. And some of them were home runs right out of the gate, and some of them were singles. There is differences, but for something to completely not work in a market, I think is a challenge. I think that's more of an ego saving maneuver. So there's obstacles and challenges on both sides, but the cool thing about franchising is that it's been overcomeable, if that's a word. I don't even know if that's a word, but it is now overcomeable.
There you go.
Surmountable. I think that's the real word. Is that it's surmountable because there's other people with the same tools, processes, equipment as you that are doing it. You just got to tap into their knowledge. And I think that's another obstacle that people have is I'm on an island here. That's the whole idea of franchising. You should be having conversations with vendor partners. You should be having conversations with other franchisees. You should be in lots of conversations with the franchisor. Dive in, and I haven't seen it not work when someone is that engaged.
Yeah, good point. And that's one of the key things that I found myself in the business, that you got to get out there and you got to see what else is going on, and you got to see who else is successful, how they're successful, and et cetera, and see what will work for you. Not everything will work for you and how you run your business and interact in that franchise community. But it's a beautiful thing when you get out there and you get involved and you come back with some great ideas, and also some things that you shouldn't be doing, that's not working. You mentioned several great things in talking about some of the obstacles on both sides. But one thing that really caught my attention is the family part of the franchising concept. And I find that with a lot of different franchisees across the board, not only as the corporate big brands, but small, Anytime Fitness, et cetera, that really is the great story. Can you tell us about your story, your family, and how that works?
Yeah. Well, I feel like I'm preaching to the choir here, George, with your decades of experience and, working with your wife and your son, George Jr. But it is one of the things that really drives me. And, I don't have virtually everything that I want in this world, but I have so much to be grateful for. And I think part of that is from working with my wife for 21 years, Stephanie, who is just unbelievable. And even my son's one who's just starting his entrepreneurial journey before he goes into college. Rather than just getting a job, he's doing something that's entrepreneurial. I'm sure that comes from something that God gave him, obviously first, but also just being in this environment, just soaked in this environment of like, hey, I'm not just going to trade my time for money. I'm going to do something else. I'll take a little risk. And hopefully I get outsized rewards. So, and then my other son, who just turned 20 in February, is actually working for the master franchisee of Anytime Fitness down in Australia. I'm in Denver. And he is out there in a junior role, but in their performance division for coaching club owners and franchisees on how to optimize and make their clubs as smooth running and as profitable as possible. So he's in this role where he's traveling around. He's based in Sydney. He's been to Perth on the other side of the country, Melbourne, Adelaide, doing club visits, and then meeting with the top executives in that franchise organization, which is, I'm totally biased because it's owned by a friend of ours and someone that is running an organization that is just running at high speed and doing everything right. So he's in this learning environment, getting paid to be there, living on a beach in Australia. This wouldn't happen without franchising. Living on a beach in Australia hasn't happened for me as his dad yet, but hopefully that happens. But going back to my wife, like when we first opened our Anytime Fitness, I'll tell a quick story. We were driving, we wanted to be really good at remote management. So we opened our first club 6 hours away from our house over 2 mountain ranges. And we were going over there, and it was in the middle of a snowstorm, and we're going through Glenwood Canyon. I don't know if anybody's ever been there, but it's kind of a treacherous, windy road. At portions, it's actually going over the river and things like that. I'm trying to keep my eye on the road, to keep the car on the road. And all of a sudden, Stephanie's like, bring, bring. I was like, what are you doing? She's like, the club phone is ringing. You better answer it. And I'm like, I'm trying to drive through a blizzard right now. I'm not going to be doing role playing. And she's like, bring, bring. And I'm like, okay. Hello, this is Guy at Anytime Fitness. How can I help you today? And we had to do a role playing because she's like, well, if you can do it while you're driving in the middle of a blizzard, you can certainly do it when you're sitting in the office in the gym. So like she's all about preparation, role playing, getting the processes down, understanding. She's clued into everything. And I'm not as well prepared as her in general. So it starts with like her and I's relationship and our different strengths and our different weaknesses. And then just being there for each other, you know, at the high five moments and also at the challenging moments. So it starts with her. And then our sons, you know, they're in the, you know, before they have their driver's license, they're in the car with us all day, right? or, you know, to and from school and things like that. So they hear all these conversations, and then they hear all the conversations at the dinner table. And it's not just about numbers. They get that. it's all about the people behind the numbers, because they've heard all these stories. And if there's something going wrong in an operation, we can usually tie it back to the actions of one person or a group of people, or things that we're not doing and things that we need to change. So the other thing is, they understand the codependence of humans on this earth, so they understand when they see a business go out of a business, or a business closed down, they're not like, oh, something closed down. Like, they understand, like, wow, that family must be really affected. And on the other hand, they've been around a lot of celebrations. They've seen, heck, they've even seen like Chuck and Dave, who, they met when they were tiny little boys, now they see Chuck and Dave and what they're doing right now, running global operations and doing all these great things and helping out, less fortunate people, and all these other things that they're doing. My older son is drawn towards charitable work like that's related to business, that's funded by businesses, with Anytime Fitness. I think next week he's going to India to work in the Mother Teresa homes, and then Nepal to work with, underprivileged people. And that he understands that some of this charitable work, all of it, is funded by something, And so if you have a successful business, you're in a better position and have more freedom to do that. So they get the interconnectedness of humans and business and life that I don't think it would be that evident if someone was working a corporate job and kind of cushioned from the outside world and all the actions a little bit. That's how I see it. And I don't mean that in a derogatory way. There's plenty of great people doing that kind of work. It's just, this is the world that I know.
Yeah, you mentioned I think that's a great point, because there is a difference in corporate America, and you've been there, and as a franchisee and having more independence and kind of setting your own time frames, etc. But as you talked about this from a family perspective, how do you keep the balance? You mentioned a number of different things, and I know I take one part of what you said. If my wife and I were driving down the road and she did a bling, 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 and let's rehearse, and there would be total chaos, and that would take place. So that's a learned trait that you have there. But how do you keep the family balance with the business kind of blocked out a little bit, or have you developed and been able to do both at the same time?
Yeah, I think that's something you learn over time. I like the term work-life integration more than work-life balance, because it's always a part of, if you're being responsible to your mission and your team and your clients, and like us, we've run 24/7 365 businesses since June 1st, 2007. If something goes wrong, someone's got to deal with it. And so I like the integration idea better. And I think that's the other lesson that I hope my sons have seen, is like, we work all the time. We talk about work all the time, but it's interspersed with all the other things that we talk about. It's just part of the fabric of life, rather than a position or a time of day or something like that. It's just a fabric that runs through it. And if you're building businesses and affecting people in a positive way, what's wrong with that fabric running through even part of a Sunday afternoon sometimes, and it's usually at the franchisee level at a certain point. There's a couple layers between you and the ultimate client and things like that. You can have systems set up, but also, a few years ago when we sold Frenchies Modern Nail Care to the Riverside companies, we took 2 weeks, a couple of weeks off. And it was the first time I ever went anywhere without my laptop. There's a funny cartoon in franchising. Someone's like skydiving and they've got their laptop with them and things like that. And it was about a week in, and we were on a sailing boat, and my oldest son said, like, I have never seen you not work this much in my life. Not once. He was born in 2006 when we started the business. And he's pretty insightful kid. And he's like, how does it feel? And I was like, I looked around, I was like, right now it feels pretty darn good. But it's the first time I ever did that. and we didn't have cell service. And it was the right time to do that. And more I hear about people, and I think this is a societal thing too, that more and more people are understanding that going into a room and shutting the door on everything for a little bit of time is really sometimes the best way that you can actually help your business, your mission, your team, and things like that. I've done it the other way where it's just grind. And sometimes you just got to pick your head up from the computer and look around and get some space. I think that's a really, really good trend that I see more and more people doing, from the person that's running the operation, making sure that they have some time and space to just go do other things and get away from the business, to franchise founders that take a year off after I didn't do that, but from franchise founders that, take a year or something like that off. And so I think that's one of the ways that people, even in the thick of things, can, it might not be a week, or it might be a few hours away, and just giving your mind time to soak things in. Because if you're an engaged and caring owner, your mind's working on stuff all the time. It just needs a little bandwidth to come up with creative solutions.
Yeah. So let's talk about what you're doing today and your podcast and the different things that you're doing. Tell us about that. And we'll flash up on the screen also some of your sites, social media, etc.
Great. Well, today I'm no longer operational in Frenchies Modern Nail Care. I'm more engaged with our Anytime Fitness clubs than I've been in a lot of years, and more engaged with the franchise system and all the tools. And holy cow, they've really grown. And then I do advisory work for brand founders, entrepreneurs, leaders, and executive coaching as well. I'm also on the board of a portfolio company called Head to Toe Brands, which has beauty brands under it. And I like to be an active part of that board and bring value to the table from my operational background, because it is a portfolio company and a private equity company. And there's a lot of wicked smart people around the table with a lot of experience in doing deals, M&A, and all those kind of things. And what I like to do there is bring my operational expertise to the forefront, and also under consideration for some of the decisions that are being made. And I like to help them out in any way I possibly can. So I'm very involved in keeping track of everything that's going on with Frenchies and the other brands, and staying up to date on that. And also having great conversations. The podcast that I do, the Franchise Scale Up Show, started out as a way for me to have conversations with really interesting people like yourself, and the founder of Anytime Fitness, and vendor partners, and people that are doing just amazing things. And so that's one of the ways that I stay involved in franchising and coming up with different ideas and different perspectives that I like to try to bring back to my own clients and their businesses, things to think about, things to consider, things that have been proven to work in other areas, and that maybe we can apply it to their businesses and help them grow in a smart, responsible, and reasonable way. So that's what keeps me busy on the business front, staying abreast of everything that's going on in franchising, so that I can bring it back to our own businesses, as well as businesses of people that I work with.
Yeah. Sounds like you got a really busy schedule there, young man. Well, what you're doing and quite inspirational. As we close, what advice would you give some of our listeners that are out there that may want to reach out to you to get more advice with respect to franchising and how to go about it and so forth? You said a lot of great things that are very enticing, I think, to our audience that see that there's more types of franchising opportunities out there. But what would you say?
Mm-hmm. Well, first I'll do a shameless plug, and that is that I do offer a free, what I call a filter the noise call, to anybody that's in business, wants to get in business. It's about 45 minutes, and we really hone in on an issue that might be holding somebody back. I haven't had anybody had anybody walk away from this saying like, I didn't really get much out of that. It's so, being on the path for 21 years, being super engaged with everything that's going on in the industry now, I just usually have a different perspective, and I'm not blocked by any emotions or baggage or anything like that. So I offer that for free. People can go on my website and book a call with me. And then in general, and this is what I share with everybody, from people that are struggling in franchise systems to people that are thinking about getting into them to founders, is more conversations. Just have more conversations. You can read, you can sit behind your computer all day long. You can, engage in research all day long. Conversations are where the magic happens. So I have a saying that my team and everybody around me is sick of hearing, but I say everything happens in a real conversation. And sometimes that's hard to do, especially if you're struggling in some area or something like that. The last thing you want to do is call up some other dude and be like, hey, I can't get my sales going here, or whatever the case may be. But that's like 2 seconds, and you talk to somebody that's really good in the area that you're struggling in. I guarantee if they're doing well and you're not, you're going to learn something in that conversation. Just get your ego out of the way and have that conversation.
There are, and I belong to a pretty large group that I'm sure that you'll know, is the active and retired NBA players. A lot of professional athletes in football and some of the other sports that want to get into franchising, but don't have the time to get into franchising. That hopefully when they see this show, that some may reach out to you, especially the Legends of Basketball, which is a group that I belong to and on the membership committee, which is the ABA, NBA, Globetrotters, and WNBA, and so forth. A lot of these folks reach out to me on occasion, wanting to get into franchising, but don't really have the total dedicated franchising. So look forward to hearing from some of those folks. But is there such a thing as a franchise, in your opinion, a franchise owner that can be an absentee owner or be somewhere in between there? That you might,
that's the dream that some, more unscrupulous franchise organizations, semi-absentee, absentee. And usually I would categorically say to that question, no. But if someone has the wherewithal, the capital wherewithal to hire people that can take the role and take it on as almost an ownership role, then there is the possibility there. But it's a question of the capital involved, because somebody, just like you know this, George, like somebody in business and somebody on a team, there's got to be one leader that's like got a view on everything. It's engaged in every area, not doing all the work in every area, but they're engaged and they're knowledgeable and they're tied in, because there are franchise professionals out there. I know a lot of them that could take on that role if somebody had, the capital to do that. Right. And so, so in that case, I would say it is a possibility, but I would also say I will, if talking to somebody, I will really, really dive in on that, because I really don't want anybody to lose in franchising. And if I see a situation where I think it's going to end up in an L, I'll be like, no, don't do that. And I had to say, like, one of the things that you shared with me in our conversation is something, and it goes to your question. And I'll tell you the lesson that you taught me the other day. You didn't say it in these words, but there's 3 spaces, like, to be a really good, effective business owner. And one of them is in your office, sitting down behind your computer, knowing your numbers, knowing the KPIs, looking at the operational directives that you have and your strategy. And the second is in the 4 walls of your business. Like, you got to know your team, you got to know your clients, you got to know, like, one of the things that you said, you sat outside one of your restaurants and look at the traffic patterns, things like that. And the third space is your community. Like, you got to be known in your community personally, not just from a reputation standpoint or anything like that. And that really resonated with me. And to be honest, I looked at some of the businesses that I've been involved in and said, like, I wasn't good in that area. I needed all three of those. And that's why it goes back to your question. And so if someone says like, oh, I want to be a franchisee, but I don't want to, be part of the business besides the funding of it, well, then you have to have someone and you have to pay someone probably pretty well to be in all those three spaces and to care about it, just like an owner would.
Right. Well, that's a good response. And I wanted to hear your response. One of the things that I also recommend to some of the folks is that if you can't be, then you find a partner, to your point, that has a vested interest. And a lot of in the restaurant business, a lot of times you may bring on a manager that is a part owner that puts in a small, not the full amount, but a small amount, and has a part to play in above store level profit and loss statement, and that's their buy-in and their skin in the game that works for them in that particular segment. So, but I also agree that being an absentee owner doesn't work. So,
right. Yeah.
Well, I have really appreciated, enjoyed having a conversation with you. Our second conversation in a short period of time, but I can tell that you're very successful in what you do, and you will continue to be successful, and that legacy will continue on with your sons as well. So thank you for being a part of our show today, and hopefully our listeners out there will be able to pull something from this conversation and reach out to you through your contact information that was displayed. So, Guy, thank you.
Sounds great. Thank you so much, George. I appreciate you and everything you do.
Thank you.
This has been Catch as Catch Can. The game isn't over. Your success story is just getting started. Head to tinsley.speaks.com for exclusive content, resources, and opportunities. Catch as Catch Can with George Tinsley Sr., a production of Live Stream Editors.